He was the face of speed on the big screen, but the real shock came after the cameras stopped rolling. When Paul Walker died in 2013, fans around the world mourned the loss of a movie icon. But behind the scenes, his family and close friends were left to deal with something even more personal: his private garage. Hidden away from the spotlight was a collection of over 30 ultra-rare cars, many never seen by the public, some not even legally allowed on U.S. roads. But that was just the beginning. What they found inside these vehicles, from handwritten notes to unfinished projects and secret charity plans, told a deeper story. Ownership was tied to a shadow company. Valuations sparked legal battles, and tucked inside glove boxes were messages no one expected. What they uncovered wasn't just a collection, it was a legacy. This is the shocking truth about what they found in Paul Walker's garage after his death, and why it left even his closest friends stunned. To the world, Paul Walker was Brian O'Connor, the fearless, fast-driving undercover cop from the Fast and the Furious franchise. He was charismatic, laid back, and forever linked to street racing culture. But behind the Hollywood fame and on-screen horsepower was a man whose passion for cars went far beyond the roles he played. In real life, Paul Walker wasn't acting. He truly lived for cars, not just to drive them, but to build them, collect them, and understand them down to every bolt and weld. What many fans didn't know during his lifetime was that Paul had been quietly amassing one of the most jaw-dropping private car collections in the world. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't post flashy videos, tour his garage for social media, or boast about rare finds. His obsession with cars was personal, even sacred. His garage wasn't designed to impress. It was a private retreat, a working shop, and a museum of motion that he rarely shared, even with those closest to him. After Paul's tragic death in a high-speed crash in 2013, his family, business associates, and estate attorneys were forced to do something unthinkable: sort through the possessions he left behind. That meant opening the doors to his private garage, a space few had ever entered. What they found inside was more than a collection. It was a reflection of Paul's soul, full of surprises, contradictions, and hidden depth. There were over 30 ultra-rare vehicles packed inside, each with its own story. Some had been kept secret, stored under tarps and registered through shell companies. Others were clearly in-progress projects, stripped down and half-complete. The deeper they went, the more they realized this wasn't just a garage. It was a living time capsule, filled with handwritten notes, obscure JDM imports, and cars earmarked for charity auctions. And the most shocking part? Almost none of it had ever been seen by the public, not even by fans who thought they knew Paul Walker best. When the garage doors finally opened, what Paul Walker left behind stunned even the most seasoned collectors. Parked row by row, tightly packed in a large industrial space in Valencia, California, were more than 30 ultra-rare cars, a dream lineup that most enthusiasts would never see in person, let alone own. But Paul had quietly acquired them over years, often flying under the radar, making private purchases, or trading discreetly through trusted connections. At the center of the collection were vehicles that blurred the line between collector-grade art and mechanical weaponry. Among them was a 1995 BMW M3 Lightweight, one of fewer than 130 ever made, essentially a factory-built track car that Paul reportedly owned 5 of. Nearby sat a Celine S7, a carbon-fiber American hypercar with a reputation for raw speed and rarity. There were Ford GTs, multiple Porsche 911s, and a Toyota Supra Turbo, a subtle nod to his fast and furious roots. But it was his Skyline GTR collection that truly left fans speechless. Not content with showroom specs, Paul had imported and personally modified several Nissan R32 and R34 GTRs, each one tuned with racing components and handwritten tuning logs. One R34, rumored to be the exact car he used in the Fast and Furious franchise, had been kept in private storage, an untouched piece of movie and JDM history. Some cars were unregistered, others were barely street legal. A few had never been photographed publicly. It was clear this wasn't a celebrity garage for show. This was a vault, curated by someone obsessed with performance, history, and individuality. These weren't trophies. They were investments of the soul, cars Paul wanted to understand, improve, and preserve. This collection was more than valuable. It was personal. And yet, the deeper people looked, the more they realized. Paul never wanted it to be found. As investigators, family members, and business managers combed through the garage inventory, they made a strange discovery. Many of the cars weren't owned under Paul Walker's name at all. Instead, they were registered through a performance company called Always Evolving, a motorsports and tuning outfit Paul co-founded with close friend and fellow racing enthusiast Roger Rodas, who tragically died alongside him in the 2013 crash. Always Evolving was, on the surface, a high-end racing and tuning shop, known for modifying supercars and fielding vehicles in time attack and GT racing. But internally, the company also functioned as a vehicle-holding shell, designed to protect the identity of its owners and manage high-risk assets. Through this legal structure, dozens of Paul's cars were technically corporate-owned, offering layers of privacy and complexity. This led to immediate confusion after Paul's death. Who really owned the vehicles, the company or Paul personally? In some cases, titles were split. Others had pending modifications financed through shop credit. Some cars were consigned for future sale, while others were earmarked for private auction or charity through Reach Out Worldwide. This wasn't just a paper trail, it was a maze. The setup likely served multiple purposes: tax shielding, insurance advantages, and discretion. But it also made it nearly impossible to separate Paul's personal property from business inventory, especially as Always Evolving began to dissolve in the wake of Rodas's and Walker's deaths. Lawsuits followed, both from creditors and those seeking a cut of the collection's estimated $18+ million value. What started as a garage became a legal battleground, with more secrets than titles and more questions than answers. Amid the immaculate Porsche turbos and all-American muscle, some of the most controversial finds in Paul Walker's garage were the illegally, or barely legally, imported Japanese domestic market, JDM cars. Paul's deep obsession with Japanese performance machines, especially the Nissan Skyline GTR, was no secret. But what raised eyebrows was how he got some of them into the country. Several of the R34 Skylines in his collection were brought in under the show and display exemption, a loophole in U.S. import law that allows non-compliant vehicles to enter the country for exhibition purposes, but limits how often and where they can be driven. It's a fragile designation. The vehicles aren't fully road legal, they can't be registered like normal cars, and they're virtually impossible to insure through standard channels. One insider claimed that at least one of Paul's Skylines had dubious paperwork and might not have passed federal emissions or DOT standards. But Paul didn't care. For him, it wasn't about resale or road trips. It was about engineering purity, owning the car exactly as it was intended to be built in Japan, with no compromises. He reportedly worked with private importers and compliance shops to bring the cars in discreetly. And in at least one case, he reportedly helped fund the legal effort to get an R34 cleared through U.S. Customs, paving the way for other enthusiasts to follow. These weren't just cars to Paul. They were statements, rare, forbidden machines that represented the pinnacle of 90s engineering. But by collecting them, he also took a legal and financial risk most celebrities would never consider. Some of the Skylines remained unregistered until his death. Others were mid-compliance, with half-finished modifications to meet DOT rules. It was another glimpse into Paul's mindset: passionate, obsessive, and willing to break the rules for the right reasons. As the cars were inspected and cataloged for valuation and potential sale, Paul Walker's garage continued to reveal more than just rare machines. It revealed memories, intentions, and a voice that refused to be silenced. Tucked inside glove boxes, center consoles, and hidden compartments were handwritten notes, scraps of paper, notepads, even torn receipts with scribbled tuning data, part numbers, and detailed observations about each car's handling and performance. But the shock came not from the technical details. It came from the emotional weight. One note, found inside a Nissan Skyline R34, described how the car made Paul feel when he drove it at night. Feels like flying, smooth, angry, alive. Another, jammed into the center armrest of a BMW M3 Lightweight, simply read, "Might be the cleanest one left. Don't ever flip it." These weren't just cars to him. They were companions, experiences, and pieces of a deeply personal puzzle. Some glove boxes even held track notes and suspension tuning logs, detailing alignment angles, tire feedback, and even preferred RPM shift points. But perhaps the most emotionally powerful note was allegedly found inside a GTR, scrawled in blue ink on a sticky note. "This one's for Meadow. She'll drive it one day." A quiet, hopeful message for his daughter. These weren't planted props or scripted memorabilia. They were the raw remnants of a man who lived and breathed speed, not for fame, but for the connection he felt with the machine. These messages made it painfully clear. Paul Walker didn't just own these cars, he loved them, and they loved him back. Not every car in Paul Walker's garage was ready for a showroom. In fact, several were found in pieces, partially disassembled, mid-restoration, or stripped to the shell. These weren't investments. They were projects, in-progress builds that Paul had been actively working on before his death. Tools still sat beside some of them. Wiring harnesses were half-run. One classic American muscle car had masking tape with a hand-drawn to-do list on the dashboard. To outsiders, these unfinished cars might have looked like clutter. But to those who knew Paul, they were evidence. Proof that he was more than a celebrity collector. He was a hands-on builder, just as comfortable under a lift as behind a camera. His friends recalled how he'd lose hours in the shop, grease on his hands, soldering wires, or debating exhaust configurations. This wasn't about resale value, it was about creation. One project, a gutted Datsun 240Z, was believed to be his next personal driver. Another was a 60s-era American muscle car that he was reportedly restoring for a close friend. These weren't just mechanical shells. They were chapters he never got to finish. And perhaps that's what made walking through the garage so hard for those left behind. Because each incomplete build represented more than an unfinished car. It represented a future that never got built. In a world where so many celebrities slapped their names on projects they barely touch, Paul Walker was different. He lived in the process. He valued the build. And these half-finished cars were his final message to the world. This was never about looking cool. This was about doing the work. Among the hypercars and tuner legends was something that no one expected. A handful of vehicles with handwritten tags taped to their dashboards. Some were marked with just 2 letters, RO, and others had full sticky notes reading Charity Auction, ROWW. It didn't take long to connect the dots. ROW, Reach Out, Worldwide, was the non-profit disaster relief organization Paul Walker founded in 2010. It was his way of quietly giving back, flying teams of volunteers into the aftermath of hurricanes, earthquakes, and fires to provide aid where it was needed most. And now, it appeared that some of his most valuable cars were earmarked to fund it. Among them was a heavily modified 1993 Toyota Supra, reminiscent of his Fast and Furious ride. But this one had never been shown on screen. Another was a Boss 302 Mustang, tagged with a yellow sticky note and instructions for a future charity gala that never happened. These weren't after-the-fact tributes. These were Paul's own plans, still in motion when time ran out. It became clear that Paul saw his garage not just as a personal collection, but as a reservoir of value, a place from which he could support the causes he believed in. He wasn't waiting for the cameras to roll or headlines to be written. He was just doing what he could, preparing to use his passion for cars to help people in crisis. The discovery of the charity-tagged vehicles hit hard. It reminded everyone that Paul Walker's legacy wasn't just forged in horsepower or Hollywood fame. It was built on service, humility, and intention. He didn't just want to be remembered as a car guy. He wanted to be remembered as someone who used cars and his success to make the world better. Even in death, he was still trying to give. As the garage was sorted and appraised, reality hit hard. Paul Walker's car collection wasn't just rare and meaningful. It was worth a staggering $18 million. And with that kind of value came something Paul never would have wanted: a legal storm. Because many of the cars were tied to Always Evolving, and others were owned in part by Paul personally. Figuring out who owned what became a legal minefield. His estate, led by his father as executor and his daughter Meadow as the primary heir, had to untangle a complex web of co-ownerships, titles, and verbal agreements. Some cars were still in Paul's name. Others were registered under the company. A few were reportedly missing titles altogether. To make matters worse, creditors and former business associates began to surface, claiming stakes in the collection. Disagreements formed over sales, transfers, and whether certain cars were even Walker's property at all. In a tragic twist, what had started as a deeply personal process of cataloging a beloved collection quickly spiraled into a cold, drawn-out battle over dollars and documents. Eventually, some of the cars were sold at auction to settle disputes. In 2020, 21 vehicles from Paul's estate were auctioned off at Barrett-Jackson in Arizona, generating over $2.3 million. But not all were sold. And some insiders say key pieces were quietly withheld from public sale, kept within the family, or privately negotiated away from the spotlight. What had once been a passion-fueled garage had become a war zone of valuations, lawsuits, and estate battles. And for many who loved Paul, it felt like the final blow, watching his pure love for cars reduced to court filings and financial wrangling. While the legal drama played out on paper, the emotional impact of sorting through Paul Walker's garage left a far deeper scar, one that doesn't show up in headlines. For Meadow Walker, who was just 15 when her father died, the process of identifying and dividing the cars was as painful as it was surreal. This wasn't just about assets. It was about her father's identity, frozen in time. Each car held a memory, each project a piece of his personality. To those closest to Paul, including family, old friends, and former colleagues, walking through the garage felt like walking through his mind, his handwriting on a post-it, his favorite tools left near a partially built engine, the radio station still programmed into his Porsche, It was as if he had just stepped away and never returned. Some friends broke down when entering the garage. Others found themselves paralyzed with guilt or regret. Many said the hardest part wasn't the cars. It was seeing all the things Paul never got to finish. The builds he never completed. The races he never entered. The plans he never made it to execute. There were also emotional ties to Roger Rodas, whose own connection to the garage added another layer of grief. Some vehicles were believed to be in shared possession between the two men, further complicating an already delicate situation. Their deaths left two grieving families and one sacred space filled with memories that neither side was quite ready to let go of. At a glance, it was just steel, rubber, and fiberglass. But to the people who loved Paul Walker, his garage had become a mausoleum of passion and purpose. What they found in Paul Walker's garage after his death wasn't just shocking, it was transformative. Beneath the $18 million valuation, beneath the rarest imports and supercars, beneath the legal chaos and emotional wreckage, was something far more powerful, a legacy that stretched far beyond the screen. Paul wasn't a celebrity collecting cars for clout. He wasn't using his fame to inflate values or curate Instagram-ready garages. He was a builder, a student of speed, and a man obsessed with the feeling of being connected to the machine. Every part, every build, every handwritten note was evidence that this wasn't for show. It was real. This was who he was when no one was watching. And yet, what made it even more extraordinary was that he never intended for any of it to be discovered. His cars weren't on display for the world. His intentions weren't broadcast. He gave quietly, built quietly, loved quietly. Even his own family didn't know the full scope of what he'd created until they opened that door. But perhaps the most lasting shock isn't what they found in Paul Walker's garage. It's what it revealed about him. It showed that he wasn't just a man who loved fast cars. He was someone who believed in using them to connect with others, to explore, to give back. It showed that behind the Hollywood lights was a humble, grounded gearhead who found peace under the hood. And today, that legacy lives on. In every engine note that echoes his passion, in every reach-out worldwide mission that saves lives, and in every fan who now sees that Paul Walker wasn't just playing a car guy. He was one. And that, more than anything, is what they truly found in his garage.